بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه ومن والاه. Brothers in Islam, one of the major crises that this ummah suffers from, that this ummah is going through, is division between this ummah, is dispersion and fragmentation between this ummah, disputes and differences among this ummah. What's going on to this ummah, how this ummah is divided, is something unprecedented, is something that never happened before to Muslims. It's something that in the Islamic history you cannot find anything like that. What's going on? How Muslims are divided politically, socially, psychologically, spiritually, mentally, intellectually. In all these aspects, Muslims are divided between themselves. In politics, we see that Muslim countries, they fight with each other. They conspire with the enemies of Islam against each other. We see that they make plots against each other. I think political division between Muslims, political division is something that Muslims ever experienced. Something is not something new to Muslims, but what is new to Muslims is this social division among Muslims. This is something that Muslims never experienced, such a division. How they lost their sense of belonging to this ummah. How they lost this brotherhood among themselves is something totally new to Muslims. They don't feel that they all belong to Islam. They all belong to one ummah. They all believe in one Allah. This is something really new. In the past, there were political wars among Muslims, but these political wars couldn't change Muslims, couldn't divide Muslims politically among themselves. This never happened. A traveler in the Middle Ages in the past, such as Ibn Battuta, this person could travel for 30 years around the Muslim countries, around the world for 30 years without having money, without having anything, without having passport or anything like that. Because wherever he was going to, he could find Muslims, they were welcoming him. Muslims, they were supporting him. Muslims, they were giving him shelter. They were giving him food, water, clothes, anything a traveler needs. That was how Muslims were in the past. If we compare this example to what's going on to Muslims, we see how Muslims are now changed. Muslims have changed nowadays. If we compare this to displaced Muslims and refugees in the Muslim countries, these countries where there are wars in Syria, in Iraq, in Myanmar, in other places, you see these people, these displaced people, when they go to another Muslim country, you see Muslims in the host countries, you see that they don't like them, they don't support them, they scorn them, they don't help them, they see them as burdens on their shoulders. This is how Muslims are nowadays. And there are Muslim countries totally reject Muslim refugees. They don't take them. And you see how these states, such as Gulf states, these rich countries, you see how people live in these states, in Gulf states, these rich countries, and you see how their neighbor lives, how people in Yemen they live. You see every day there are dozens of children that they are dying just because of there are no food, because of the lack of food. And you see how people in their neighbor, how people in Gulf states they live. This is something because of our iman, because our iman has become weak. This is something you cannot find in the Islamic history. We are politically, socially, ideologically, we are all divided. Some Muslims may say that these are all political problems and these are all happening because of great powers, because of Western countries and their foreign policies. Their foreign policies, these countries, they destroy us. These countries, they divide us. They make sectarian wars between us. This point to some extent is true. To some extent is true. But it's not justification. This cannot explain the reality what's going on to Muslims. So first we have to acknowledge that this is our problem. We are the main cause for all this happening to us. It's our fault. We cannot blame others for our faults. First we have to blame ourselves, because no one can divide Muslims unless they accept to be divided. As Martin Luther King says, a man cannot ride your back until it's bent. When you bend your back, then someone else can ride your back. Meaning, what's happening to Muslims is because of themselves. No one can divide Muslims, destroy Muslims, unless they accept to be divided. Otherwise, who prevents me, you Muslims, to help and to help and donate financially? Those people, they have nothing in the Islamic countries. These refugees people, in this winter, it's in winter there, they don't have anything. They don't have shelter. They don't have food. They don't have anything. Who prevents me, you, to help them? It is not politics. It is we, because our iman has become weak. Our bond of unity disappears gradually disappears among Muslims. Muslims no longer feel that they belong to one ummah, that they should support each other. Another point, how Muslims are divided. We see that how families are divided and destroyed. Their relationships are so weak. And the same with Muslims in society, with each other. You see that they lie to each other, they backbite each other, they don't talk to each other, they hate each other. These are all happening among Muslims. So we should blame ourselves before blaming others. It's our problem, it's not others' problem. So what's going on to Muslims nowadays is something wallahi strange. If a Muslim reads Quran and sees that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says that you are the best nation, you are the best nation produced for mankind, and you see this ayah and you compare it to what's going on to Muslims, you say, how can this be true? How can Muslims be the best nation? So then you will realize that this ayah cannot be applied to Muslims nowadays. This ayah does not talk about us. Because how can we become the best nation while we see all the division between Muslims? So how Muslims can be divided while they listen to Quran and they read Quran, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. All of you, fast, hold fast. All of you, hold fast to the rope of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and do not become divided. How Muslims can kill each other, how Muslims can hate each other, how Muslims can be divided, so divided, they don't feel this sense of unity, while they read and they know that the Prophet ﷺ describes the real believers, and he says the believers in their mutual kindness, compassion and sympathy. They are just like one body. They are just like one body. When one of the limbs suffers, the whole body responds to it. The whole body with wakefulness and fever. How Muslims can be divided when they listen to Quran. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً. Muslims are only brothers, are just brothers. How Muslims can be divided by this? So this point we consider this point. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم ارحم موتانا واشف مرضانا وسلم أحياءنا وآمن روعاتنا. اللهم فقد أنزلت علينا بركتك من السماء فعلمنا يا رب كيف نشكرك. يا رب علمنا كيف نشكرك. يا رب علمنا كيف نشكرك. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يديم هذه النعمة علينا. اللهم انصر المسلمين المستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم انصر المسلمين المستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم انصرنا على كل من والى أولياءك، من كل والى أعداءك وعاد أولياءك ورفض شريعتك واضطهد دعوتك. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون ولذكر الله أكبر. أقم الصلاة.